The Mercury 2, also known as the Lost Ship, is a large spacecraft belonging to the Sol Transgov, whose wreckage is scattered throughout Sector 0 and Subnautica below Zero. The player must explore the main parts of its wreckage in order to obtain necessary equipment and progress along in the storyline. This ship has an extremely interesting backstory to it, and provides some intriguing insights into the Subnautica universe. Today, I'm going to be covering every interesting bit of lore relating to this amazing ship, in 10 minutes or less. If you end up enjoying this video, please consider subscribing, it helps me out a ton. But without any further ado, let's get right into the video. The Mercury 2 ship was a human spaceship owned by the Sol Transgov. The Sol Transgov, along with the three other Transgovs we know of, Altera, the Mongolian independent states, and the unknown Transgov on the far side of Andromeda, from which the Sunbeam came from, controls at least one solar system and phase gate. They most likely agreed at the Charter, a legal contract that most Transgovs agree to, which outlines the requirements for an organization to become a Transgov, as well as outlining the rules these Transgovs must follow. But one PDA entry found inside the wreck of the ship provides us with some incredibly interesting lore regarding this Transgov. The Sol Transgov is a very different Transgov compared to the ones we already know of. They describe themselves as having freed themselves from the endless desire for growth and the waste that accompanies it. They claim to pursue whatever will make them the best people they can be. They are also apparently extremely diplomatic, with many volunteers giving up their own time to reach out to a wider community and share the lessons they have learned to protect their interests. The PDA entry then goes on to describe the Mercury 2 and its mission. It tells us that the Mercury 2 was a fast-moving diplomatic vessel inhabited by some of the volunteers described before. They were on a mission to the Mongolian mining interests in Ariadne's arm to negotiate logistical support and advice in exchange for a modest mining quota, which would preserve the local environment. They would then return 6 months later to inspect the mining sites. I find this Transgov extremely interesting. They are a lot different from the other greedy Transgovs that we learn about in the Subnautica universe, and are seemingly a benevolent force amongst humanity, which is very relieving. The wreckage of the lost ship is scattered between the lily pads biome, purple vents, and the tree spires biome. Due to the buildup of plant life and the presence of rust, it is estimated that the ship is somewhere between 30 and 100 years old. Inside the ship, we can find multiple cruise logs, which provide us with insight into the story of this fascinating spacecraft. The story of what happened to the ship is told by 4 separate people: Captain Diana, Yasmin, Stefanos, and Elliot. Let me explain each character individually, before describing the entire story in chronological order. First, let's start with Captain Diana. Captain Diana was a very self-trusting individual who was very willing to take risks for a reward. She was highly intelligent, as you will see later, and believed she could never fail. She trusted her crew, but oftentimes would trust her own instincts over the advice of her crew. Nevertheless, she was a very capable and strong-willed leader. Next is Yasmin. Yasmin was described as a busybody by her fellow crewmate Stefanos. She loved to travel around the ship, keeping things in check, and helping others whenever they needed it. She was in a relationship with her fellow crewmate Stefanos, and they enjoyed spending time together, as we can learn from a voice log describing a picnic in an empty spot on the bridge. Stefanos constantly bombarded her with questions, however, she enjoyed answering every question. Up next is Stefanos himself. Stefanos was an extremely talented and thorough engineer. He was extremely talented at fixing things, as you will also see later. He spent a lot of time with Yasmin and enjoyed her company. He loved to ask her questions just to see her smile. And finally, we have Elliot. Elliot was a xenolinguist, meaning he studied the language of aliens. He was the main reason that the Mercury 2 decided to explore 4546b, convincing Captain Diana that it would be worth it, although he later regretted it. Now that you understand each individual character, let's dive deep into the story they tell us, in chronological order. This story has been pieced together from the cruise logs, found amongst the wreckage of the lost ship. The Mercury 2 was traveling through the 4546 system, returning from a 3-month mission with the Mongolian mining interests in Ariadne's arm, as we discussed before. While passing by planet 4546b, the Mercury 2 scanned the planet, and in those scans, the ship's crew discovered precursor structures on the surface, although they didn't know them by that name. Elliot was extremely excited at this discovery of a possible alien civilization, but more so at the potential of an alien language. Most of the crew simply wanted to go home. However, Elliot attempted to convince Captain Diana to take a team down to the planet to explore. Stefanos was largely opposed to this action, however, but Captain Diana decided to take a risk for a potential reward, claiming she would be a fool not to take the opportunity before her. The scans of the planet revealed little mineral resources, but nonetheless, Diana decided to send out a team. And that is when the ship encountered, as you might have guessed, the Quarantine Enforcement Platform. When they traveled near to the planet, they detected the beam launched by the Quarantine Enforcement Platform. And the most interesting part is that they were actually able to avoid it. Diana dumped the emergency flares as well as the water from the nuclear core powering the ship. Now, for those of you who don't necessarily understand nuclear reactors, let's just say that in the process of nuclear fission, a lot of heat is produced. This heat is used to create steam, which then turns a generator, producing electricity. So, dumping the water from the nuclear core was extremely intelligent because since the water was so very hot, it was able to confuse the weapon's tracking. This is extremely interesting because we also learn that the weapon tracks its target's heat signatures in order to hit them. However, because of Captain Diana's big brain move, they were able to avoid destruction and land the ship on the surface of planet 4546b, although it was damaged in the process. Stefanos and Yasmin were assigned to undergo repairs on the Mercury too, and to fix the thrusters that were damaged after the near miss and landing. They were forced to work on the thrusters in 20-minute spurts in order to prevent getting the Iceworm Leviathan's attention, but eventually, after a decent amount of time, they were able to fix them. In the meantime, Elite was sent out to explore the area and hopefully find the alien life they scanned, along with a team of 6 people. The crew was in high spirits and they were very excited. I mean, who wouldn't be? As they explored, they came across an SOS signal. This signal is most definitely the SOS signal Alan sent out from the Sanctuary Zero Architect base. Now, if you don't know the story of Subnautica Below Zero, Alan is an alien architect who was stored on board Sanctuary Zero's databank. The Sanctuary's power began to fail, however, so Alan began to send out an SOS signal that was picked up by this team of people and later on by the player in Subnautica Below Zero. However, when the team got excited and began to enter the water in order to explore, they encountered the many predators found on 4546b, most likely brute sharks based on the location of Sanctuary Zero, but they could have also been chelicerates, cryptosuchus, or another similar creature. Half of the team, 3 people, were killed by these predators, sending the rest of the crew running back to the Mercury 2, terrified to venture out again. Stefanos also tells of a crew that came back telling stories of giant worms tunneling through the ice. Ice worms. This could be LA's crew, or it could be another crew sent out for a similar reason, at a different time. But regardless, Stefanos dismissed them, telling himself they must have been disoriented and confused. But that was most definitely not the case. It was around this time that the crew of the Mercury 2 encountered the Corabacterium. Captain Diana described it as a strange sickness some of the crew were showing symptoms of. They were quarantined, separated from the rest of the crew, and it was at this point that Captain Diana was faced with an incredibly tough decision. She decided they had to leave. The threats on the planet, the tunneling ice worms, terrifying predators, and the Corabacterium were too dangerous. She decided to skip the systems check in order to prevent gaining the attention of the ice worms, or tunnelers as she called them. This was pretty risky, but they didn't have much choice at this point. The most difficult part about this decision was what to do with the quarantined crew. The crew sick with a deadly Corabacterium. She eventually was forced to make the decision to leave the sick crew behind. She left them with food and survival kits for only 2 weeks' time. Although she told them she would come back, she didn't think that she would be able to land the Mercury 2 twice. She would have to abandon them, leave them behind. And she had to do it for the sake of the Mercury ship. Or so she thought. As we all know, leaving planet 4546b would not be allowed either. As soon as they launched their ship, the quarantine enforcement platform would shoot them down, and this time, they would most definitely not escape. Yasmin, in the final voice log of the Mercury 2 ship, describes what happened. They were attempting an emergency takeoff. The crew was short-handed, so Yasmin was forced to help. I think the best way to understand what happened is to listen to how Yasmin described it. It must have been a truly traumatizing experience.
I heard the sound of metal tearing, and for a split second, everything was tinged bright green and unbearably hot. Then I saw daylight, and I was looking down at the ocean and ice. The strongest wind I've ever felt roared in my ears, ripping through the ship. People went flying out the side of the Mercury, so much screaming and chaos. I was lucky. I had just clipped into my sea tinker. Stefanos came out of nowhere, like a malaika, an angel. I felt his rough, calloused hand grasp mine with the gentlest of urgency. It felt like time slowed. He said, "I gotcha. Just follow me, Ella." I don't know how, but he used an emergency tether to drag me to the nuclear reactor core, the strongest bulkhead in the ship. We hit the water and everything went black. He's sleeping. I think he might have hit his head. I'm exhausted. The adrenaline has long since worn off and my body aches. I think I might have fractured the rib. I'm gonna shut my eyes for a bit. When I wake up, I'll figure this out. I'll save us.
The gun struck the Mercury 2 ship, splitting it into several pieces and sending the wreckage to rain down onto the planet, where we find it in Subnautica Below Zero. People went flying everywhere, but Yasmin was lucky and had just strapped herself down. She was saved by Stefanos, who came out of nowhere, taking her to the nuclear reactor core, which had the strongest bulkhead protection. It would be the safest place to go in this situation. When she woke up, Stefanos was lying next to her, supposedly sleeping. They were both seriously injured. She decided she would get some sleep. She was feeling tired. I think it's pretty safe to say that after she closed her eyes, she never woke up. And that's everything we know about the story of the Mercury 2 and Subnautica Below Zero. It's an extremely interesting yet tragic story of yet another ship that fell victim to the quarantine enforcement platform. And honestly, it's one of my favorite pieces of Subnautica Below Zero lore yet. Let me know in the comment section down below if you like this video. Did I miss anything? Do you have any video ideas? Any questions or concerns? Please let me know. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, it's free, plus it helps me out a ton. I'm gonna reach 25,000 subscribers as fast as possible. Also, please check out my other Subnautica and Subnautica Below Zero content, you may like it. Be sure to check out my Discord server and Twitch channel. The links are in the description. If you want to be awesome, please support me on Patreon. Thanks to my patrons, Sir Lord Mister, Electrobite, Skeptic, Baby Yoda, and King Ocho. Become a patron and support today. The link is in the description as well, and I will see you guys in the next video.